Welcome to the Stress-Free Dentist Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Block. As always, I want to inspire, entertain, and educate you on the best tools and technologies out there. My goal is to help make your practice and career more profitable, efficient, and most importantly, more enjoyable. And check out all of my nonfiction and children's books on Amazon, and check out the stressfreedentist.com for any upcoming events. And if you're feeling you're a dental professional that's burnt out, or you just feel stuck or want to get to that next level, visit the International Academy of Dental Life Coaches or www.iadlc.com, and we'll get you matched up with a life coach that understands dentistry. I also wanted to thank our amazing sponsor, Equa Marketing. They have helped me and my practice over the years to improve with SEO and website performance. And to find out how you can make your practice dominate in your area, go to www.equa.com/MSMSFD to book your complimentary meeting. Again, that's www.ekwa.com/MSMSFD. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode. And today I am joined by a good friend and co-founder of Flomo.com. It's actually useflomo.com. We tried to get Flomo, but we ended up with Use Flomo, but it all goes to the same place. Dr. Jeffrey Greenberg, welcome to the show.
Hello. Good to see you.
Yeah, so just a quick backstory about Jeff and I. We had met years ago. We were actually working in the same office in South Boston. And then we got reacquainted at a retreat that I was running in Chicago, outside of Chicago a few years ago. And Jeff and I were just talking about the same problems we had. And we have two very different types of offices. And we were just tired of repeating ourselves and training new staff and all the pain that goes along with being the owner of a practice. And then we just kept in touch and we wanted to solve a problem. And that's where we came up with Flomo, which is all about, documenting and your protocols and standard operating procedures and just getting everything organized in your office. But Jeff, I just wanted to start with your origins into dentistry. How did you even decide to become a dentist?
So my entire family's in dentistry. So both my parents are dentists. My sister's a dentist. My brother is a dental office manager. So we don't have a ton of creativity as far as that's concerned in our family. But for a long time, I kept trying to push away the assumption that I would become a dentist. I'm the youngest of my family as well. And I always knew I was going to go into the healing arts. That's why I was thought of it in my brain. I knew I was going to help people heal in some way. And I always resisted it also because I saw my family struggle with all of the operations of dentistry, if I'm being very honest with you. I mean, that's actually the biggest thing. All the HR nightmares, the fires putting out, that was the stuff I didn't want. And so for a long time when I was younger, I was like, I just don't want that. But I really enjoy the field of dentistry. Like I grew up in the field of dentistry. And so as much as I kept trying to look around, I kept seeing, I actually really, really like it. So I kind of had an epiphany moment. Actually, while I was taking the MCATs, I had the epiphany moment. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I would rather go into dental. So I actually applied to dental schools without really telling anyone in my family until I got in for the most part. And and so it's kind of been a good journey ever since.
So you were going to apply to medical school, changed your mind.
And, I didn't even send the applications out. I was like, nope. I remember I was looking at a histology slide on the MCATs of a gerbil cell. And I was like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. This is not what I wanted. And I stuck on the dental path ever since.
And where'd you go to dental school?
Tufts. I went to school, Tufts, graduating class of 2012.
And after, did you do a residency, a GPR, AEGD?
No, I went straight into private practice, associating with different offices.
And how long did you associate until you opened up your own practice?
So I probably, got the bug around 7 years in. But didn't start actually making it a thing until 8 years in, something like that. So it took me a little bit of time to start figuring out what I might want and going out there.
Now, did associating the other offices, did that help you kind of mold your philosophy and style of dentistry?
Absolutely, in every possible way. Finding the right mentors is huge, and sometimes mentors can be bad, and those are also a great learning opportunity. And so I was taking notes furiously, no matter which kind of office I was in, and also learning about myself. Like, because I didn't take through the residency, I gave myself years to find myself, to figure out what my brand actually is. And so it gave me a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I was similar. I associated for many years in different offices, and they were very different. And I kind of pick and chose what I liked and what I didn't like, and took those to create my own style. And your type of practice, you are outside of Boston.
Yeah.
Your practice is different than mine. We're both private dentists. Can you explain your practice? How many chairs? What kind of technology do you have?
Yeah, sure. So I did a startup. So that was the kind of my story. And so about 6+ years ago, I started up in a small area. It only had two chairs. It's in the heart of Cambridge in Central Square. Two chair. I ended up purchasing the equipment from a former dentist that was used to be in that space, but none of their patients, nothing else. And that way I always kind of call it a startup with a leg up. So I was able to actually utilize things as a seed equipment, and then I could grow from there and upgrade my equipment. But I did it knowing that I had the ability to expand. But I made the decision for myself to only expand to 4 chairs. And that's exactly what I have now. So we went through the expansion phase after about 2 years. And for me, technology is awesome, but it has to make sense practically for me. So I'm a big workflow person. I want to make sure that everything that I have around me supports who I am, supports my team. And so, a lot of the physical equipment that we have is used to reflect that. So, as an example, I do a lot of Invisalign in my office, and so that is an important factor. I primarily do it for functional reasons, not just for aesthetic reasons, although that's obviously another aspect of what I do. So, we have the latest iTero as an example, as that's the scanner of choice that we have, because that is the one that Invisalign works through. So, there's definitely a lot of clear aligner therapy that happened in my office, but honestly, I don't do anything surgical. So I don't do any extractions, any implant placements. I restore. I do full mouth reconstruction in a lot of other ways from a pros perspective. But I am a general dentist. So there's just a lot of stuff regarding that. I think photos are everything. So I do a lot of photography in my office. That's a big factor across the board. And I have a fully digital office for the most part. So there's no lab work, but also there's no physical paper really. So it's a kind of a paperless office as well, kind of front to back.
And you also, like myself, I 2 years ago went fully out of network. You did something similar.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I would say I kind of always knew I was never going to take over Cambridge. That wasn't my plan. I don't want to have offices everywhere. I always wanted to kind of be small but mighty. That's kind of how I thought about it. But if you can't grow from a square footage perspective or from a multi-office perspective, the next growth phase is to actually take off insurances, so you're able to see more patients as well. And so when I started up, I only was in network with 2 insurances, and then I pared that down. I would say about 4 years in, I want to say, is when the actual moment happened, which means I was pre-planning for that about 2 years before that. So there's a lot of pre-planning work that had to go to make it smooth for me, for my anxiety, to make sure everything just went nicely, so I could be fully organized about it. That's how long it took me.
Yeah, we saw that we could do it after COVID. We had to because we had such a capacity issue, and we
Yeah.
Went out of network with some of our smaller plans, and then we saw we could do it successfully. Built up great relationships with patients; they stayed.
Mhm.
And then 4 years ago, we dropped Blue Cross, which was 20% of our practice. And then 3 years ago was Delta, which was 50% of our practice. And I have never been happier. Um, and like you mentioned, it's growth by reduction. It's
Yeah.
if you're physically not able to add more chairs or more patients, then go out of network, and that's a
Yeah.
solution.
And there was a lot of reasons behind my journey. But I think for me, the most important thing was I now have the freedom to really treat my patients how I want to be treated. And that was a big shift of thought. When I first initially, my biggest argument against it almost made me feel like I was greedy. I was like, no, 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 you have to stay in network. But then I kept realizing all the battles we were having nonstop, partly with patients because of misinformation, partly with insurances. Partly in-house. We were just trying to figure out how we can get better for the patient. And we just consistently felt like insurance was putting us as a sacrificial lamb in between the patient care. And that's not how it should happen. And so, yeah, so once I kind of realized that no, I actually can control the fees in my own office. I actually very clearly say this out loud to my patients, to my team. I have no plans on being the most expensive dentist in all of Cambridge. I actually like being mid-range. I'm fine with that. I am very content with that. And I like to have the freedom to be able to do a pro bono case, which you're not allowed to do, as an example, with insurance. And so if you're in network with insurance, you're not allowed to do officially pro bono cases in your own office, which is absolutely wild. That's just one example of these weird like shackles that are put on us when all we want to do is just good dentistry.
And you mentioned you're big on workflows.
Yeah.
Tell me exactly what you meant by that.
So as a startup, I should also mention I'm the office manager of my office too. So we're very, very small, as I was mentioning. And so I had to learn very quickly how to do all the different types of jobs. When I started, I was by myself actually for the first 2 weeks. But the ads were out, but I wasn't getting any nibbles. I ended up having an on-the-job trained dental assistant as my first employee, and it was kind of us running around. And I had phones next to my patient's ear while I was doing a cleaning. I was also taking the phones. Like it was like one of those kind of moments where I was trying to do all of the things. I was the one submitting insurance claims. I was the one trying to get reimbursements for patients, putting in the arguments and the requests. I was trying to figure out, all that stuff, pre-estimates, you name it, AR, trying to get the money back from the patient because we misquoted or something along those lines. I was also in charge of marketing, also in charge of all the other stuff. So there's a lot of different hats I was constantly wearing. And I learned very quickly that if I wasn't going to be able to be organized, I would fail, or have a full mental breakdown. It was really one of those two things. And so early on, I had to realize that I had to have a good set of decision trees. I can't keep it all in my brain. So I need to have like a second brain. I need to have another external thing I could feed information into and then use it as reference for myself. And it was not a legal reason to have like a manual. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like having a moment where you're like, wait a minute, how do I run end of month? How do I run end of year? That only happens once a month, once a year. But like just the small logistics of it. And, I thankfully also had a lot of great mentors through this entire process, colleagues, people I could ask, but that's not everything. And you have the information once, but it doesn't always sink in. All the nuances don't always sink in. And so, that was an important thing. And then once I started delegating, I need to be able to express those words clearly rather than, oh, just come find me when you run into this issue. That was another huge issue. I'm supposed to be seeing patients. I'm supposed to be handling this. I'm supposed to be overseeing hiring. So there's a lot of things that go on. And so I again, learned very, very quickly that I needed to stay organized. And thankfully, organization is one of my biggest strengths. But it's still, even for me, a constant challenge. And so I utilize technology to help me out in a lot of ways. Yeah, having clear documentation was everything. In fact, I often get complimented by my team, by people that are interviewing at the office, that there's, everything just seems very clean and clear, and that's a big compliment to me.
So you initially started out, it was really just you were doing everything. And how big is your staff now?
So um, I currently have 5 in-person team members, and I have 4 remote team members.
And how do you use workflows and documented policies and protocols with your team?
How don't I? So it's literally every single pathway of potential issues. We have some type of workflow. So just as an example, with the team, we have an entire aspect. I'm just going to, we're in the springtime, so I'll just kind of mention one particular workflow that we have. We have an annual established spring cleaning. So once a year, we shut down for a half day. And we actually kind of we grab pens and paper, we leave the office, just really right outside. And then we walk in with fresh eyes. So we kind of look at the office from a bunch of different ways, as if we were a new patient or a prospective interviewee, and just things that are out of place, things that we put out on the shelf for a long time, thinking someone would take care of it. No one did. Just a lot of these like little things, but you're trying to have like a different mindset in it. Just these random, like, yeah, we clean all the time, but like these random cobweb in a corner and stuff like that. So we find that having an established process, as opposed to when someone complains, oh, the office was dirty, that's when we went into overdrive. So as opposed to be reactive, we're trying to be proactive. So workflow allows us to be proactive and then enjoy the space for stuff like that.
What about new staff and onboarding new staff? Because I know it's been such an issue after COVID.
Yeah.
It still is a major issue, finding and keeping and retaining staff.
Yeah. No, I think if I can point one thing that most owners, managers kind of fail at, is not being clear from the get-go about what's expected, and then also where are your resources before coming to me. Because, we hire people because hopefully they have really good common sense. But unfortunately, common sense only works when you actually have good resources accordingly, right? And we want them to be able to ask questions. Of course, that's fantastic if they ask questions. However, if these are low-hanging fruit that's easily documented, that they can search for easily, that is everything. And so, in fact, what I do a lot of onboarding stuff before they even start, they're already given like just a snippet of a bunch of little videos. So they know what they're about to walk into. What's our mission? What's our value? What do we stand by? What's our North Star? As we're making every decision, where are we headed? What do we do at the office? I've actually worked at other offices before where I was a temp dentist as well at one point. I had no idea what the office, does. And so if a patient needed an implant, I don't know if they do implants there. So just as an example, so I had to keep going back and forth to the office manager. Well, what do you do? And, the answer usually was just come find me. Well, that's not helpful when I'm in the moment or when I'm preparing to talk to a patient. But having a clear sense of what happens before they even get there is huge. And then once they've begun within their 90 days, I have an entire kind of program I put them in, which again is all in our pathway, our workflow, a reference document of what's to be expected for 3 days. For the first 3 days, what are we expecting of you? What should you be working towards? Your first 3 weeks, what should we be expecting of you? And with the first three months. And so we actually have a entire protocol and a workflow guided per type of position. So I'm able to actually explain. It's obviously going to be different from an assistant versus a hygienist versus someone who works at the front desk, insurance coordinator, whatever it might be. But again, the better I can about explaining it, the easier their process will be.
Yeah. So, for example, we have a whole like hygiene category of standard operating procedures and protocols, and everything's documented, which is really helpful for like a temp hygienist. So,
Yes.
the temp
Yes.
hygienist comes in, they're not just going to be like thrown to the wolves. We have a protocol on when to refer to the periodontist, the name of our periodontist, when they're
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
What are our policies on scaling and route planning?
Yeah.
Everything is documented, and temps love it because
Yeah.
a lot of offices they go to, they're just given nothing. And guess what? Maybe this temp really liked my office, and maybe they're going to stay. Maybe they want to come back and work for us more or on a full time basis.
Yeah. No, I think I do that. I do something very similar with temps as well. I think, and partly because I was a temp dentist at one point too, like I have a soft spot for anyone who's coming into a fresh space for them. And there's an entire culture where everyone kind of is, moving with the flow, but they feel like they're odd man out. So I always like to make sure there's a nice roadmap for everybody, but it automatically creates trust and safety. And those are two of the most important things that people look for when they're actually trying to find the right job for themselves, or just a steady temp who are like, you know what? I like this office. If there's an issue, they know they can come speak to you. If there's an issue, they know they can find their resources. So yeah, I think that's fantastic that you're doing that.
And I have everything from, the first person to come in, how to turn on the compressor, the lights, the Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
to, how do we 3D print a model, to how do I want my room set up for an implant or composite filling. I have everything documented so that, don't come and ask me.
Yeah.
We have everything in Flomo now. Go look at Flomo, and don't bother your teammate
Yeah.
because I call this the Judy scenario. My mom's name is Judy, and let's say Judy is on the phone, and someone calls and they ask how much is bleaching, and Judy doesn't know, and then she's got to stop Mike and ask Mike, and now we have two patients on hold. If they don't know the answer and they don't have a place to easily find the answers, it's
Mhm.
so inefficient, and it's like 1,000 paper cuts. These little things just build up over time, and it causes frustration, stress, and ultimately it costs money.
And burnout. Like, I mean, there's been days before I had a lot of better documentation where my entire day was just answering questions about the minutia that could so easily be resolved by being clear and thinking things in advance, and laying them all out on paper. And I immediately saw my free time increase just by doing this. I mean, I feel like that's not often said. Like, the creation of these documents are meant to free you up, and it's nice. I didn't actually know what to do with all of my free time at one point. I was like, oh, I could see more patients. I could actually go for a walk at lunch. Wild. I can actually do something at lunch as opposed to, like, be inundated with more stuff. So it really is really helpful to have that.
Yeah, and the other scenario is, what if Judy was the be all know all staff member, which often happens. They're the legacy employee. They've got
Yeah.
everything in their head, and then they retire, they get sick, and they're not in that day, and then you can't get certain things done. And the goal for me to having standard operating procedures and everything documented is so the next person can that torch is passed, and the next person can just pick up because
Yeah.
everything's written down in very simple steps.
That's exactly right. And I saw so many different offices not crash and burn because, I do believe that our field is very resilient. It's more that everything just stopped to a halt. And then all of the higher ups were just so stressed. And it was clearly such a challenge. To go with what your line of thought was, where, one aspect is retirement and stuff like that. I've seen cases before where people have, they are ahead of the curve in the sense that they're going to see coaches and consultants and they're trying to just get better, right? They're not thinking about it from a reactive perspective. They're thinking proactive. They hire a coach, they hire a consultant, they come in, they recommend a bunch of things. Everyone's in agreement. They stick with them for a few number of months, and everything's humming along. Everything's going well. And then they leave, but there's no real aftercare. And so what usually happens that I've seen, at least in a few offices that I've worked in that have had this, is someone leaves within the first 6 months. And these are people that got handheld information. They were handholding all this information. They were integral for the actual creation of the system. And now a new person needs to learn. So new person comes on, okay, teach me. Well, the person just left who had to actually, you had to learn from. But if there was some type of aftercare of documentation that could help onboard a person for this particular system, that's another huge aspect as well.
Yeah, and I think a few things for people that feel like this is overwhelming to start documenting everything. I recommend just start simple. Start with maybe the three, one, two, or three biggest things that cause you stress. And maybe it's, your staff doesn't know how you like to set up for a crown. Put everything on your cart and take a picture of it and document exactly what you need, and boom, it's and put it in the bank and it's there. Just the other day, we changed our policy on getting patients set up for home sleep studies for sleep apnea.
Nice.
I updated that. I redocumented it. So again, staff's not coming to me. They're going to look at Flomo. But if you're feeling like this sounds overwhelming, start very slow, start very
Yeah.
simple, and start with your biggest stresses, or what we call pain points.
100%. I mean, this was not created overnight. Not just Flomo, which also wasn't created overnight, as you know, but from my own experience, creating documents are not created overnight. They are constant reflections of what is my biggest pain point? What is my biggest pain point? What's keeping me up at night? More times than not, it has more to do with onboarding, hiring, HR, management, how to have really tough conversations with patients or other people. I actually have a literal reference document in my Flomo specifically that just teaches me how to dismiss a patient properly. Just that alone. And so when things happen, when things are actually moving fast, and we need to get a letter out, I have a letter on standby. I have how to properly send it. What are my rules and restrictions for my individual state? It's these little thorns that happen throughout the entire process that it almost blindsides you. Now, obviously, you're not going to know everything that could potentially happen to you, but you need a living, breathing system that you can add more into, subtract, edit, change. That kind of stuff takes a really, it can seem very overwhelming, like you were saying, Eric, but like if you just follow it one step at a time and just keep asking what's the biggest pain point and just pivot from there, it is huge.
Yeah, and another example, I got tired of telling staff what to do when they don't have a patient, assistants or hygienists. So now we have a documented checklist of all the things that they can be doing, and we print it up and they check off what they've done and they hand it back in, and it's all in there. And then SOPs are great for me as the dentist, because there's some cements or bonding agents that I always forget the steps.
Yeah.
And, instead of like Googling it, I have an SOP for those. And as a young dentist, to have a workflow for how you do a crown or composite and it's all documented, not only is it great for your assistant that you're trying to train and they're new, or you have a different assistant with you that day, but it's great for you because when you create these workflows, your brain goes on autopilot, procedures get more consistent and more efficient. And guess who's going to understand that? The patient. They're going to be like, wow, that was fast.
Yeah.
And it makes your day in and day out life so much less stressful.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that. Another example comes to mind. So I just went to Spear recently as well, back in Arizona, and one of the things that gets me all the time is we see these either great posts online or we take a great course that inspires us and we have a whole new step-by-step sheet that kind of teaches us how to do something. But it's either a screenshot or some notes that we take down on our phone. We're not really sure where it is. So I input everything into Flomo as a text document. And then what I do after that, I have a checklist in the behind me. And as I'm prepping, as I'm doing my thing, like, all right, what's the next step? What's the next step? And I'm noticing, you know what? This workflow isn't exactly how I would like to do it. So let me edit it. And I'm editing it in real time with the patient lean back. While I'm waiting for a material to set, I'm real quickly being like, you know what? My setting time, I want to be a little bit slower than that. So we're not going to do 4 minutes. We're going to do 2.5 minutes. I find that this material, it's just these real time stuff actually needs editing and needs adjusting. And I cook a lot. I bake a lot. So for me, it's kind of the same thing with the recipe. I'm like, while I'm doing it, I'm like, you know what? I don't like using this. Let me just switch it up. And so having something that is malleable, I think is really important too.
That's a great comparison because it's like I compare having SOPs to like, baking a chocolate chip muffin.
Yeah.
There's steps. You go from A to B to C to D, and that's how I do my dentistry. I typically go through each step. I don't go backwards, and my assistants know, they can anticipate my moves. They know what instruments I like, what materials I like, and it just makes everything so much quicker and less stressful.
Yeah.
Just wanted to wrap up with this was awesome, by the way. Thanks for sharing here how you do things and your story. Just wanted to wrap up with a final question. What advice would you give to the young dentists out there that may be struggling?
Um, I really, I really find the best advice I've ever received, but is so important, is have a life outside of dentistry. I know they may be struggling in dentistry, and you're like, you'd think double down in dentistry is the appropriate way to go. But my best ideas came outside of dentistry. My best ideas, the reason I'm doing a startup came outside of dentistry. The reason I do everything came outside of dentistry. The reason you have to be able to come home to something that's not dentistry in order to oftentimes feel fulfilled. And so it's advice I used to give for people that are in dental schools. I used to be a mentor for dental students while they're doing their thing, and have a lifeline outside. Because if something were to happen, or you realize this is too stressful or whatever, you want to be able to release that tension somewhere else, and be able to have conversations with people that have nothing to do with dentistry. And I think that would be the best advice to give.
That's awesome. Great stuff, man. And I just want to piggyback on that just to keep positive people around you.
Yes.
Negative people will just tear you down. So keep a positive group of peers around you, whether they're in dentistry or not. People that challenge you, but in a positive way. So everyone go out, check out useflomo.com. We got the name Flomo as a combo of words of workflow plus FOMO, because, fear of missing out on something awesome that's out there. And that's what Flomo is. You get your first month free. And we hope you love it, and our goal is to make your lives and practices easier, because it's made our practices and careers and lives easier. So Dr. Jeff Greenberg, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Block. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening to the Stress Free Dentist podcast. And don't hesitate to get in touch with me at info@thestressfreedentist.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Until the next episode, I'm Dr. Eric Block, the Stress Free Dentist.